I don't know what it is, but Dave, you sound good today.
Yeah. Again, I think it's the illness.
Whiskey and cigars? Oh, sorry.
Inevitably. No, I'm pretty sure it's one of my 4 small children probably gave me something that I get to appreciate over the 4th of July weekend.
Are you dealing with like a bunch of kids at home right now? I think you guys might homeschool, but like I've got kids at home and it's moderate chaos in the house.
It's complete chaos always, but part of the reason for the move was to give mother-in-law and father-in-law's help, which we're getting. So
Totally.
It's better than it used to be.
Simon, you got a bunch of kids around the house. How's that going for you?
It's crazy. They're always, I always have to cook and clean and take care of them all the time. They always have questions. It's crazy.
Yeah. You definitely captured all of the parenting experience.
And my mother-in-law. God.
I wonder what a week at Simon's would be like for my kids.
Oh wait,
Quiet.
no, his neighbors like have
man.
running gun battles, so it can't be quiet.
My neighbors are sweet people.
Are they?
It's the others in the neighborhood.
The others in the neighborhood. Yeah. Why are you always othering people?
Well, they're not my people. They're shooting guns, and I'm a pacifist.
Is Camp Simon open? Can I drop off some? You could take him.
No, my house, despite my pacifism, is full of weapons. So kids, not at all child friendly.
That's a good question, though, Dave. I'm looking for like some outsourced parenting right now. Simon, are you down? What are you coming up on a break at all? No,
I'm super busy. I'm busy all the time.
He'll take both of our kids to abandoned.
Do your kids want to watch Love Island with me?
Concert.
Yeah, you mentioned Love Island the other day.
I'm a big Love Island guy. Really into it.
What is that?
It's really bad. It's one of the worst things I've ever seen with my own eyes.
I don't know if this is right or not, but I don't know if it's Love Island or not, I should say. But once upon a time, I had a Marine, a sergeant, awesome dude, who I think won one of those shows. This is one of those like Bachelor style shows, right? No,
kind of. I was unable to figure out any point or purpose to it.
Oh wait, no, he won Bachelor in Paradise or something.
Insane. I do not. I'm being 100% honest. This is my number one Simon the Boomer opinion. I do not understand what inspires a person to have the ambition to do so many things that are considered very normal activities today, to include be an influencer, record yourself making short form content every day, 15 times a day, go on any reality television show for any purpose whatsoever. None of it makes any sense to my brain because it requires, you don't accidentally do any of that. You have to really work to convince the producers of this show to put you in the show. It's not an easy thing to get it in. And so many kids now grow up with dreams of being that. And I'm just whoa, we really went wrong by convincing people that this is the aspiration for what you got going on in your life.
So your kids are not going to be influencers, Simon. Your kids are not.
I'm hard pressed to imagine Simon with kids, but one of the worst parts of it, right? Because I assume that if I ever have children, they will rebel against me. They will be, and all of them will be automatically influencers from day one.
You realize that, Simon, you're a podcaster.
Yes. I'm well aware.
Okay, Boomer. Okay, Boomer.
Yeah.
So the only time I've ever used the term "okay, Boomer" was recently, and I said "okay, Boomer," and the response was immediately "okay, renter." And I thought that was
good. That's good.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Heinous is what that was.
Just leaning into it.
We need to make sure that you're not a renter in the future, though, Dave. That's one of the things I just learned about you that we need to fix.
I'm not a renter.
Oh, so they were wrong.
No, it's they're just insulting the generation. They're insulting the entire generation, not me specifically.
Got it. Okay. See, that's how disconnected I am. That's I'm an elder millennial. What do you want from me? I'm disconnected. Okay. Well, welcome to the Go Rodeo podcast, everybody. We are already on a tear, as you can tell, and joined by Garrett Smith, host, joined by regular co-host Simon Kuhn and Dave Cottle. We discuss everything between geopolitics, warfare, the ongoing defense technology renaissance, venture capital, and all things surrounding those topics. And I think we're going to get on a good set of topics today. So big news of the week, headline on most major publications has to do with the Senate passing the big, beautiful bill, or the Senate version of the big, beautiful bill. I think House is doing something right now. They've got to vote on it before it goes to Trump for signatures. Simon, spin us up. What's going on?
So the Senate passed the bill with a large number of changes before it made it through the Senate. Mostly what you saw was whole sections of the bill removed by the parliamentarian, which is an administrative function checking that they're playing by the rules. So large swaths of the bill were removed, and it caused the bill to cost a lot more money. The current projections to what the bill is going to do to the deficit for the next 10 years are between $3.5 and $4.5 trillion. This is a real sticky problem for the House. So it passes the Senate. It's a 50-50 vote. You had 3 Republicans defect. J.D. Vance had to break the tie, so it passed 51 votes. And now the House has 2 options. Either pass it as is, which is what they're trying to do. They've taken it up immediately. We are voting right now as we record this. Or it fails and they try to make changes, and then it had to go back to the Senate again and get voted on again. And we would start ping-ponging this bill, which could be a real headache for the Republicans.
I think you've mentioned that for it to fail would be an unprecedented event. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's reconciliation is a pretty unique process, and it only happens when a political party has the White House and both chambers of Congress. So in the history of reconciliation, it has never failed. We have never had reconciliation votes that were this close. I don't know that we've ever had them with a tiebreaker vote from the vice president. They've always been party line, but typically one party has enough of a majority that it doesn't matter.
And you were mentioning, I think before the show, that Rep. Thomas Massey from Kentucky, he's Kentucky House Rep, right?
Yep.
Apparently he's saying he's got the House votes to kill it. Is that true? I mean, that's what he's saying. Who knows if it's true, but that's what he's saying.
Yeah, so it's hard to say. He only needs a handful of defections to kill it in the House. There's a lot of hand-wringing because the House was on recess this week. So everyone had to come back into town. They've been sitting on 24-hour notice recall. There's been storms all over the East Coast that have been making it difficult for folks to get back. They are under extraordinary pressures. And I also want to mention before we get off of it that Tom Tillis of North Carolina is retiring from the Senate over this bill. It is a seriously contentious and difficult issue for the Republican caucus. And what you see in the House side now is there's a wing of the party that is, hyper focused on we're spending too much money. And there is a wing of the party that is, centrist and doesn't want to see social safety net benefits cut ideally at all for their constituents. And we're just voting on the bill. We're not giving either side room to negotiate or make any changes. We're going to attempt to force the vote quickly, and the president's going to have to call these people individually and try to make deals on the sidebar, right?
I mean, so Tom Tillis, not the only Republican bowing out in advance of the midterms. Rep. Don Bacon he's Nebraska. Is that right? Nebraska. I spent a chunk of time with him in Ukraine last year. Good man. But also has caught, a lot of Trump MAGA world flack for his kind of positioning vis-a-vis the status quo or the mainstream Republican, party line on stuff. I don't know if that's specific to the reconciliation bill or not, but he also has signaled he's going to retire from the House in the next cycle, doesn't intend to. So, but all of this is likely in the face of administration threats to primary people, right? If they're
it's
not
definitely part of it,
line, right?
I mean, no matter who runs in Don Bacon's district, it's a very difficult district. It is one of the closest races every single time. And the typical wisdom for a midterm is that the sitting president loses seats in the midterm. So it's very likely that Don Bacon's seat flips blue. If anyone could have held it, it would have been him. So I think it's almost a sure thing now that it flips. What's also interesting, though, when you look at Tillis and you look at Don Bacon, is a serious brain drain from elected Republicans that are in support of Ukraine and in support of European alliances. Tom Tillis is the chair of the NATO caucus in the Senate. Him and Jean Shaheen go to the NATO conference every year. You're seeing not just moderate Republicans, but Republicans that were outspoken about the need to support Israel in this conflict are on their way out the door, it seems like.
Interesting. Well, I suppose we'll know something up or down, at least on this version of the bill tomorrow.
I think the thing that we all need to keep in the back of our brains that's most relevant for our communities, right, is the big beautiful bill has $150 billion for defense. And not only does it have that money, the Trump administration's defense request, their budget request for defense assumes that money will be successful. So there could be a real gap. In fact, some people have referred to it as flat. I actually think my reading of it is that it's less money in the FY26 budget request than there was in the FY25 budget request under Biden. Because if you don't get that reconciliation dollars, there's just a hole there.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna see. We're gonna see what happens. I think at 150 billion, to your point, is kind of in the balance for what could or could not happen in our piece of the industry. Dave, any expert commentary on matters pertaining to the Hill?
No. I think Simon's got that pretty well in hand.
Yeah, Simon's got that covered. It's amazing that he knows basically the electoral math of one House Reps district in somewhere in Nebraska.
You only have to know like 10.
Yeah,
right. There's only like 10 moderate ones left, and the rest are just like, yeah. Well, I know who's going to win the Bronx. I know who's going to win Brooklyn. I'm not looking at that map. It's no point.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to a next topic. We're going to talk about some acquisition type activities. Not much going on the deal sheet in terms of like venture capital activity. So we're going to leapfrog that and go into some acquisition stuff. I want to maybe highlight a piece of commentary that we had last week on the pod around federally funded research and development centers. FFRDCs, I think it's centers. I could be wrong. FFRDCs and UARC's university affiliated research centers. Again, I think it's centers, UARCs. I think we aimed a lot of heat at them for not transitioning a lot of tech and being a place where a lot of money goes to be lit on fire. And I think that was maybe I'm mischaracterizing the broad strokes of our commentary there. I got a note from one of our longtime listeners, and maybe we'll have him call in at some point, where he's like, he said to me, I'm going to paraphrase here. It seemed like we had some misplaced aggression because the vast majority of funding for FFRDCs comes from the Department of Energy and Health and Human Services, which is interesting. And the amount of, again, this is a huge number to, average citizen, but not in terms of relative size in the giant federal budget, but only $6 billion of funding goes to FFRDCs and potentially UARCs out of $190 billion of RDT&E that's spent from DoD every year. So those are, I think our listener critic is correct. I mean, that being said, $6 billion being lit on fire at an FFRDC still sounds like a big ass fire. But all that being said, could there be some efficiencies there? Yes. Are they doing important stuff? Probably. DARPA, FFRDCs, UARCs, they generated some of the generational, evolutionary technologies of our generation. I can't argue with that, but
I have no argument with any of those points. I think that the point that we were trying to make and potentially did a poor job is the Charlie Munger. Right. What's the I'm probably going to misquote this. Incentives, like show me the incentives and I will show you the outcome. I think the which is not unique to FFRDCs and UARCs, like across the board, we frequently talk about misalignment of incentives. And specifically in that case, we were, and I still think correctly, outlining that there's potentially a misalignment of incentives that drives like headcount more than it does outcomes.
Right. Yeah. No, that sounds right. We care a lot about rapid transition into production and care less about we as, a startup player in the space, an aspirational rising prime contractor, if I can be so bold. We care a lot lot about rapid transition into production, because that's where we see long-term value capture creation opportunities. And we don't want to be the endless R&D partner for the DoD. We want to build product and sell the product. And so, yeah, I mean, from our perspective, they are perhaps less of a helpful long-term entity for us, even if they do add value elsewhere in the DoD's acquisition and, the acquisition chain.
Absolutely. I think I actually have good news on that topic. Good news on the,
yeah, please do.
or I guess at least I'd call it encouraging news. And forgive me if one of you had a topic that's in the sheet before this, but something that made me raise an eyebrow in the president's budget, or in the president's budget. What is that, Simon? A draft or request? How does that work?
Yeah, it's the full president's budget request. Like that's what it is.
Garrett, you're going to cringe when I use RDT&E, but it's Agile RDT&E portfolio management as a new budget area.
Ooh, Agile. Ooh.
Agile. I think in conflict with budget area number 9 or new budget area number 9.
Budget activity.
That's budget activity. Sorry, budget activity number 9. These buckets of the type of spending that we do in the defense procurement apparatus. This is really interesting to me because at first pass, it sounds like, or looks like, smells like the thing that I've been asking for when you ask me what's the solution to SBIR transition, what's the solution to the Valley of Death. I've consistently told you the answer to most of those questions is giving the acquiring authority, the procurement entities, the shoppers of the DoD, the PEOs, budget flexibility to reach back across the Valley of Death and pull technologies forward and get them in the field, and to be responsiveness to operational learning more quickly than on the typical PPV 2-year plus process where they're just buying what they are required to buy or what they budgeted 4 years ago. So the new mechanism looks a lot like advanced prototyping in even some low rate fielding activities, but specifically assigned to the shoppers of the DoD, the PEOs, not to the S&TS apparatus, not to the DIUs of the world, but to the program executive offices that have to look the warfighter in the face and say, we are attempting to solve your problem. Simon, are you taking away the same thing that I am?
At first blush, love potion number 9 sounds appealing, but I want to hear Simon's commentary on it.
So it's hard to say. And here's why I think it's hard to say, because this is still the president's budget request and only for the Army. So it's like a new way of doing business, and I think it's promising is where I would start, right? Looking at how the Army's spending, it's like $460 million on budget activity 9, which is not a huge amount of money. They're very clearly like trial running this thing. It's $690 million that they're going to spend in budget activity 9. So not a crazy amount of money, but that's spread out in some really interesting places, which is what has me perked up. Basically, the Army is going to spend budget activity 9 funds only on counter drone effects, and electronic warfare. So when I see that, what I see is the Army looking at high priority categories of capability and trying to find novel ways of solving the Valley of Death problem, right? To use a term that I think has gone out of style a little bit. But that's what's interesting to me, right? Is to Dave's point, you're putting RDT&E money in the hands of the actual acquiring authorities. But what I think is interesting is that historically, when you try to solve this Valley of Death problem, it's like a new agile office or it's a new thing, so you stand up some new entity. I really like the idea of what if you gave your existing entities more interesting authorities and more interesting resources to solve the problems. Because it doesn't do me any good if you create a new rapid office that builds one rapid thing and then immediately turns into the same, like stuck in the mire. And now you just have a dozen innovation offices and a dozen rapid offices underneath them. What if the offices that are already there, and let's be honest, even if you don't like how fast they move, they are like dyed in the wool of those problem sets. We talk about PEO Soldier a lot, but PEO Soldier is in constant contact with the infantry set and with the tactical echelons. Like, they're very good at that. They know where to get that feedback. They know what those units are doing. They know what their training rotations are. Like, they truly are baked into that ecosystem. So I can't imagine like a better entity that's positioned to use creative funding lines to solve problems.
So that's a really good point. Because one of the articles, or the article that we're referencing here, actually calls out this intentionally supporting the transformation and contact concept, right? So we did, it was sort of an eye roll across the board. U.S. Army goes, okay, we're going to focus on these brigades and the transformation contract concept, and they're going to tell us how to, solve these problems and how to truly modernize. But the open question was, okay, but who's going to pay for the stuff from what they learn? Like, who's going to buy it or develop it? Does that just go into the .mil PFP process and starts all over again? And I think there was enough energy created there with, like, there are 3 areas that we truly need to modernize in extremely quickly. And this looks like signaling that we're going to take it seriously. And to your point, like, put funding in the hands of expert shoppers of the DoD that are looking those transformation and contact brigades in the face and saying, this is how I intend to solve your counter UAS problem. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that I was given a shopping list for 24 to 36 or more months ago.
Let me put a fine point on it, because we've talked before about replicator, right? And what is replicator, and how is this thing useful? And one of the big, like, standout replicator things was that through the DepSecDef into DIU, they then bought a bunch of loitering munition drones from AeroVironment. But what that funding actually went to was PEO soldier. That's where the loitering munition lived programmatically. So rather than have like these 3 or 4 bureaucratic and political layers of like, oh, we're going to get into soldiers' business and then give them the money to do it, just let soldier do it. Just give soldier flexible funding to go realize the solutions to the problems that they have, rather than having a bunch of people meddle in their stuff and maybe potentially get it wrong, right? Or maybe get it right. But
is this in conflict with one of those other kind of trend line acquisition activities that we've seen, which is pushing authority and budget out to combatant commands? Is this complementary to that? Is it in conflict with that? I can imagine a PEO soldier or a PEO aviation or a PEO whatever, potentially running after and buying, maybe developing capability that is redundant with something that a similarly empowered combatant commander is procuring with O&M or whatever they're using.
Before Dave jumps in, because I want this real bad, I would say no. First and foremost, this money was going to go to soldier no matter what. Like, there is, when you're thinking about the way the DoD writes its budget requests, those PEOs and those PEO leaderships are already arguing for their own piece of pie and justifying why they need it. What this is changing the way in which they can spend the money that they have. And the main reason I don't think it's in conflict with the COCOMs, and there is a bigger philosophical conversation about like Title 10s and how we organize our military, but the COCOMs are not sitting on the 82nd Airborne and the 101st at any given moment. They might get a fraction of those entities for a little while on a rotation, maybe, depending on what the manning schedule looks like. But the Army still sits on its premier infantry formations 90% of the time of any calendar year, right? They have the force. So if you're trying to get an idea of what the force sees as its problems, it's still CONUS. Now, what the COCOMs will tell you is what they see as the problem for their area. And you and I both know Indo-PACOM does not look the same as EUCOM. You're going to get 2 completely different problem sets. So if you're trying to equip a basic force, a force that is flexible to multiple problem sets, you're going to have to do that, in my opinion, at Title 10. And then you need to resource the COCOMs to add unique capability on top of that for their specific problem set.
Isn't that exactly the problem that everybody ends up like conflicting around? In other words, there's a perspective at the PEO about what is needed. There's a perspective at wherever OSD about what is needed. There's a perspective from the combatant commands. And what you end up with is tech that is not interoperable or redundant or worse. None of it works, right?
Maybe, but I don't see that as solving this.
I think
Dave, I'm gonna let you talk because I'm running.
I think you and I largely agree with this. I mean, I think there's plenty of space for this to be complementary. A commander is not going to be able to solve dismounted counter UAS. That's not something that a commander can do by going out and have the authority or autonomy to shop for their solution.
When you say commander, what
I mean, what we've talked about, it really any echelon, from brigade commander up to like potentially even combatant commander, like solving the problem of we need a new material solution for dismounted counter UAS isn't really in their purview. They would have to come up with their own.
In the United States, because I think what we're seeing in Ukraine is that the tactical echelons actually are solving their own problems, and then they're kind of like almost crowdsourcing solutions at the lowest echelon, and then proliferating those learnings across the rest of the tactical.
I would disagree,
and I'm not saying that's right or that it's applicable in the U.S. context or anything else. I'm just saying maybe we aren't set up to do something like that.
I think part of that is obviously there is like an existential threat, and they're doing whatever it is that they can. They are not in a position of like, oh, what is the way that we would like to do this? It's what do we have to do right now to try to increase survivability.
But do you think they would like to embark on the 5 to 10 year JSIDS process to get the next EW solution that won't work?
No, but I think that the Ukrainian government would like to be sending billions of dollars of equipment to their commanders, but they don't have the option to do that. They have their commanders doing whatever they can with what they've got.
Sure.
Right. So, and that's where I think this is interesting, because it's not really changing fundamentally how much resources or where the resources are going. It's changing the way that the entity who really is closest to these operational units without being in them can spend their money. Instead of like, you need to go set up a giant procurement contract to do loiter munitions, you can prototype a ton of shit. You have real flexibility to like, let's put some stuff to its paces, and we can move more quickly. Unfortunately, that's why they use that word agile, right?
That's the distinction that I'm trying to make. And potentially I use a bad example, but like a commander should be able to go out and procure what they need for their individual problem or mission set. If it doesn't exist, if we need to build or prototype something new, I think that's a good job for our acquisitions system, especially when everybody has effectively the same problem or the same requirements across the formations, which is why I use counter UAS as an example, because everybody has that problem. So taking this from a slightly different direction, when you all have asked me historically, like what I would do to fix the SBIR program, for instance, like fewer awards, fewer phase 1 and phase 2 awards that don't transition, and take some of that funding and make it phase 3 funding, make it transition funding. Okay, Dave, where would that go? It would go to the acquiring authority. They already use RDT&E at those acquiring authorities to finish things, integrate things, validate things, give them the right credentials, ATOs, et cetera, to get them out in the field. Giving them more RDT&E money allows them to just reach back a little further across the valley and pull forward those technologies and finish them, integrate them into their portfolios, or directly or quickly meet the demands of the user force. I'm actually like pretty encouraged by this all the way around.
What I think is super interesting is the idea that one of the lessons learned for the Army from TIC may have just been, we need to be spending the resources we have differently, which I think is a really interesting way of thinking of their modernizing initiative. Instead of going back to Congress and saying, oh, you need to triple my budget, or like, some sort of posture hearing where you're like, oh, my authorities are fine, everything's good. It seems like the Army seriously came away with, all right, we've got all of this new tech flowing into these evaluation events, and there's very clearly a gap between I've got new stuff and what my purchaser, my customer set can put into the hands of guys. So I need a new way to spend my money that I already have in order to solve this like last tactical mile.
Absolutely. And in contrast, and I get your point, Simon, is, okay, it's a drop in the bucket from a funding perspective. I think it's good signaling, but that's across the board, right? The drop in the bucket. March we awarded Boeing $20 billion for a new F-22. And at the same time, the budget we're like, okay, top priority is autonomy and UAS systems, close combat collaborative aircraft, collaborative combat aircraft is going to get $800 million, but we're going to commit $20 billion to a new F-22.
I'm actually happy that it's not a ton of money, because I don't think this is one of those problems where I want to see, $40 billion just appeared. All you're going to get with that is misused funds. They don't know what they're doing yet. They are doing truly something new here. I think it is both small enough to be targeted and to be, intelligent with how they spend it, but big enough to be meaningful. Because, it's what, 360 million focused on drones, 150 million on counter drone, and another 180 on electronic warfare. For those issue areas, that's not nothing. It just remains to be seen, and this is specific to the Army. If it was DoD wide, I'd be like, that's wholly insufficient in the amount of funding. But I do think that's a meaningful amount of money for a single year for the acquiring authorities of the Army to be putting some capability in people's hands.
It's a crazy amount of money, honestly. Like, I get that, like, in the grand scheme of federal budgets, that's not a huge amount of money, but that's a huge amount of money. Like, I still have the sense that if you could structure things such that the private sector competed for things rather than first like wiring RDT&E activities and contracts for themselves to build things on the government dime over the course of a pop that always gets extended and deepened, like there would be a lot more efficiencies realized in this development and fielding process for tech. But maybe I'm just kind of a tech optimist or something. I'm not really sure. Also, here's a call out. I think we generated a little bit of heat or something at the company that we just referenced, Obviant, who published some of this, budgeting and program activities on their website. I think we gave them some heat for being yet another company doing who knows what, providing transparency for who knows why, and now here we are referencing analysis that they've done. So maybe we've pivoted on our opinion here over at the Goat Rodeo.
Yeah, I think I'm still of two minds because I'm reading the Obviant article that was written by people and not written by AI, presumably, which I like. I still don't know if I'm bought in on AI agents reading the budget for me and pulling stuff out. But I am very interested in people who stare at the budget documents and writing helpful articles about what they found in the budget documents. Like that, I'm all in. I'll take all that you got.
When we were commenting on it too, I wasn't sure. I probably commented too soon, not understanding the business model. I didn't understand that Obviant was, that I could log into their website and just get the information. I thought that it was a subscription service that they were offering to companies like ours.
Undoubtedly, there's something like a subscription.
There's another tier,
like a tier or something. Yeah, but they do have like publicly available analysis and information, which likely is an on-ramp to subscription service. Like if you like the open and free stuff, great. We've got a freemium model, pay for the real good stuff, which, this is a complex and dynamic market. I mean, I do think you need layers of value like that if you're going to approach it in the way that we are. So who knows, maybe we'll be, corporate subscribers to the Obviant services in future. We'll see. Dave, poke around and see what we need.
I'm looking at the breakdown budget overview from Obviant right now. I think it's still going to be a long time before I don't need Simon Kuhn to explain this stuff to me, though.
Well, we pay Simon Kuhn a lot of money to do certain things. If we can offset some of that by, a subscription, Okay. Let's see. I think that's a wrap on budget activity 9. Love potion number 9 conversation. I don't know if that reference lands with people listening to this podcast or not, but I think it's a 60s rock and roll hit or something. Anyway, last bit of stuff on the docket. There are some upcoming events again around, call it the hot, conflict in the world right now, Ukraine, Russia. There's a big defense called Defense Technology Valley event being held in Western Ukraine in September. It's kind of interesting timing. It's on the tail end of DSEI, the big defense tech expo in London that happens every couple of years. So maybe this is, the industry coalescing around a European problem set where much of the industry is going to be present in, if not continental Europe, then, Europe in broad strokes. I wonder if this kind of thing is going to be useful and effective. The promoters of the event, and I'm referencing a couple of articles put out by Ukrainian journalists, they're billing it as like the single biggest defense technology investing summit in the world. It's an unprecedented and giant event, and et cetera, et cetera. I got to admit, I'm intrigued. I think Lviv is a beautiful city, Western Ukraine. It could be a cool place to go and convene. I really hope that if we send people, Russian artillery shells don't start dropping in Lviv, like for real, because they've demonstrated, the Russians, in the past couple of weeks, that they're willing to not only hit civilian targets, as they have been for a long time, but deeper into Western Ukraine than they have in the past. And that makes me think either the Russians are getting desperate, or they're recognizing that there's some psychological operation impact to, punishing non-combatants in the West and other Western nations operating in the West. So anyway, that was a jumble of topics all wrapped into one big thing. Maybe here's the question: should we consider going to that thing? I wonder. Dave, you're nodding your head. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, our soften international oriented folks flagged it as interesting. I'd probably put that back to you as well, Garrett, because it's less of our objective. We're going to DSEI, and we have objectives there for expanding our international footprint. But the objectives in this is a very defense tech founder and investor sort of event or conference. So I think probably the decision back to you if you think you would get value out of it.
So we got to send the defense, the company virtue signaling peacock over there. Got it. I'll take it into consideration. Yeah,
you're probably more likely to get something out of it than one of the sales folks. But
it's been a couple of times. I think it's always valuable to go to Ukraine. In the past couple of years, it's a tragic thing that's going on there, but it is a battle lab. That's where the modern nature of war is being invented and evolved, and to see it at close proximity and to interact with the people advancing that effort is extremely valuable. And then Bax translating it into lessons learned for what we're doing here. So yeah. Well,
Garrett, earlier you made mention of how the Ukrainians are spending their resources to do things like counter drone and drone.
Sure.
I think one of the things that those commanders have started doing is essentially government-owned / government-operated factories.
Yes.
Do you think we would want to take it that far? That feels very contradictory to what I think you generally see as the most efficient way to allocate resources.
Yeah, my techno-libertarian bent. Yes, there are government factories. There are also private entities standing up factories that then have like direct relationships with specific unit commanders.
It's super fascinating.
Yeah. So, right. So they have direct relationships where they're supplying tech, call it, drone components or munition or whatever, directly to that unit. And they have like exclusive relationships with a frontline unit. And like there's competition amongst the frontline units to like build the right supply chain and refine it. And then they proliferate that. So like you said, it's an existential thing for the Ukrainians. Do whatever it takes.
Exactly. I was wondering, do you think the Ukrainians would still do that post-war? Let's say the war goes totally cold. Do you think they'll keep and maintain their government factories?
I think that if Ukraine persists as a country, and I hope that it does, it'll be changed. But let's say the war winds down and it ends or whatever. I think Ukraine has an incredible opportunity to basically be the non-China drone component manufacturer and supply chain hub. Right. And not just for military stuff. They are figuring out how to fab all this stuff at low cost in a non-Asia country. And that is something that maybe only a conflict like this could have inspired in a Western nation. And I say Western.
The mother of invention, man. Necessity.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So I don't know. We'll see.
So what's interesting when I think about this and sort of our software background is that the U.S. government has software factories, which there has been some amount of news about lately as they have kind of become obsolete and are pivoting the way they do business and even what their central mission is. But it's funny to me to think that the government would create a software factory as if software is not a product that private entities like fully just make on their own and do it well. But the government in America, for some reason, does not create hard factories. And I know it is very difficult to create a physical factory, maybe even impossible in America, that only does defense business. Like it is very difficult to be in the industrial base and not diversified into the commercial side of the industrial base. I would assume there is some level of incentive for the government to have Dave, you might know. Do the ammo factories work like that? Right? Who makes the 155s? I'm not a smart 155 person.
Picatinny.
Picatinny, right?
Picatinny. Yeah. Oh gosh. No, but I mean, the ammo. Ammo is a good reference point. I think that we have to treat all of these things like ammunition, and that's not the way that it works. But there's no reason why it couldn't. Ammunition. The thing about drawing a parallel with ammunition is the ammunition doesn't rapidly evolve. Right. I mean, we come up with better casings and better bullets, or lighter weight materials, or better ballistic coefficients, or whatever. But those are on time horizons of 5 years or 8 years or 10 years.
I got to assume at this point, quadcopters are probably not going to disappear from the world. At least the frame of a quadcopter has got to be, and the motors that run those propellers are probably somewhat close. Those motors and those propellers get better or redesigned monthly, though. That's the difference. Nobody's redesigning a 155 shell every 30 days. They are redesigning essentially every UAS component. That's the difference. That's why the localized manufacturing is so effective. You can weaponeer your entire supply chain for your specific mission, geography, use case, using best in class, latest and greatest designs and parts. There's no need to do that for a 155 howitzer.
I do think some of those basic components, to your guys' point, for quadcopter or small UAS, we have to treat that like an attritable piece of kit, like ammunition. And,
chew through it.
Yeah, you just chew through it. And I've had conversations that with some entrepreneurs who are thinking about not building drones, but building the capacity and supply chains out near the edge environment, on a expeditionary basis. And I'm talking smaller than what we've seen from Firestorm and our friends over there, Chad and Dan and the Firestorm guys, that are all about expeditionary, kind of larger strike aircraft. I'm talking about building the capacity and supply chains so that in the event of a big conflict, you could rapidly spin up manufacturing capacity with proximity and delivery capability to the crisis point. And that is a replacement for building up a large inventory of drones on the shelf in advance of conflict. In other words, it would almost be like the just-in-time manufacturing of an auto manufacturer based on market demands, and shrunken down so that it's sitting out there in the edge of the so-called battle space. And it's a compelling business model, and just mode of operating that I think is worthy of attention. Okay. I've got a drop for something, but enjoy the conversation. We covered a lot of ground. We did some mea culpas. We talked about Dave's raspy, delicious voice. We talked about Simon's kids and being sick over the holidays and all the stuff. I guess now we're going to wait to see if Thomas Massey slides a turd into the bill and in the next 24 hours and what happens in the House. But thanks, guys. And thanks, everybody, for joining us this week. Follow us in the socials on podcast and video platforms. Leave us commentary notes, refer us to your network, and we'll see you next week.